Hello there and welcome to the Secrets of Organ Playing podcast. I'm your host, Vidas Pinkevičius. Today's guest is Dr. Scott Elsholz, who currently serves as a music director and organist at the Catholic Church in Bartlett, Tennessee, where he leads a vibrant music ministry of 5 vocal and instrumental ensembles. Previously, he served as Canon Organist, Choirmaster at St. Mary's Episcopal Cathedral in Memphis, where he led a comprehensive cathedral music program, was responsible for developing larger diocesan-wide music and liturgy initiatives, and served as artistic director for the music at St. Mary's concert series. In 2013, Scott was awarded the Doctor of Music degree summa cum laude in organ performance literature at Indiana University, where he studied with doctors Marilyn, Keiser, and Larry Smith. He also served the Jacob School of Music as an Associate Instructor, teaching undergraduate and graduate courses in church music, piano, and music theory. Scott received his Bachelor's of Music and Master of Arts degrees in organ performance from Eastern Michigan University, where he studied organ and improvisation with Dr. Pamela Reuter-Finster. As a student at Eastern Michigan, Scott received many awards and honors, including first prize in the prestigious graduate music competition. He served the music department as a university fellow and as a graduate assistant in music theory, and was later named adjunct professor of organ following Pamela Reuter-Finster's retirement. Scott has concertized extensively and has performed in numerous masterclasses and organ and improvisation seminars. He was named an official competitor in the 2006 American Guild of Organists National Young Artist Competition in organ performance. In 2001, he was selected as a participant in the Smarano Organ and Clavichord Symposium held in Smarano, northern Italy. Scott lives in Memphis with his 5-year-old daughter, Clarabella. As a family, they enjoy cooking together, playing tea party, and pretending to be superheroes. In this conversation, Scott shares his insights on developing lives with music ministry. Let's go to the show. So, Scott, I'm so delighted that we're finally reconnecting after all these years that passed, and I've seen your work and experiences on Facebook, right? But we haven't talked in person, right? So, thank you so much for your generosity of sharing ideas and your time, and welcome to the show.
I'm delighted to be here.
Great. So let's start with this very interesting question, Scott, that I always ask my guests at the beginning. How did you first fall in love with the organ? Do you remember the story?
Yeah, that's a fun story. So I wasn't even a music major when I went to college. I went to Eastern Michigan University, which is, of course, where we met. And I was going to be an elementary school teacher. I was going to teach small children. And decided I was working at a camp, summer science camp on the campus of Eastern Michigan University. And I went over to practice a little bit at the music building. And I had no intention, but I just started, I felt this tug on my heart to go into music. And I was going to be decided I was going to be a high school choir director. Ironically enough, I had never sung in choirs in high school. I was always a band student. So anyway, I auditioned, I was let into the program, and I fell in love with what I was doing. Well, I was good enough at piano to meet the proficiency that was required for an education degree. And so I was taking piano as an elective. Well, one semester, they had too many piano students and not enough spaces in the studios. They needed those only reserved for those for whom it was required. So the head of the music department at the time, Gordon McQueer, said, "We have this great new professor here in organ. Why don't you take organ lessons, Scott?" And to which my reply was, "No way, I hate the organ. I can't stand the organ." I knew nothing, of course, of the classical organ. My experience was in small country churches. But he convinced me to try one semester, and if it didn't work out, I could go back to piano. lessons the next semester when people dropped out. And I acquiesced, I agreed, and as I was walking out of his office, he said these exact words to me. Scott, sometimes careers are made out of mistakes like these. And those words proved to be quite prophetic. And I talked to Professor McQueer later, a few years later, and to verify that he indeed said that my memory was true. And he said, yes, in fact, he had. And so that thus began my study with Dr. Pamela Ryder-Feenstra, and my organ studies, that became an immediate love affair. I was enamored. I had found my voice, my instrument, and I found myself practicing 5 to 8 hours a day, and not spending as much time on my music education degree. And so I was in my senior year when I changed my program of study to organ performance, and thus began this lifelong love affair with organ performance, with church music especially, which has become truly a vocation in my life.
And that's how we met at Eastern Michigan, right?
That's right. We were both in the master's program.
I remember Osha and I, we were newcomers to the U.S., right?
Yes.
First month after September 11th, actually. It was.
Yes, I remember.
Do you remember this terrible morning, right? When that happened. But actually, you and other colleagues of our organ studio were so helpful to accommodate us to get acquainted, right? To get involved, as they always say, in orientation sessions there at EMU. So thank you for doing that, because it made a lot of difference, because we as Lithuanians, right, we had no experience with dealing with university degrees of American system, right? And it was everything different, right? There, even the food was different, right? and you even learned some Lithuanian language words, some wonderful expressions.
I'm not going to repeat those that I remember.
Exactly, right.
I still remember some of them.
Yeah. So basically, that really made a whole lot of difference. So
no, we were just thrilled to have two brilliant organists from abroad join our little studio. It was mutually beneficial, and that was a great time for us.
And then this studio was so friendly, right?
We had a good studio.
Great meetings, and we always supported each other, right? No competitive feeling or spirit, although we strive to do our best,
right,
but still.
That came from Pamela, of course. I mean, she created this environment, which she just fostered a healthy learning environment for us to try out ideas. Like you say, it was we weren't competing, we weren't fighting, but we were dialoguing. We were duetting and dialoguing together,
exactly.
In all manner, in organ music and improvisation, and in many respects in life. Right. And it was truly a family.
Do you remember that storytelling improvisation event when we did this Bremen, musicians of Bremen, right? We played different keyboard instruments, right? For kids of the kindergarten in EMU system or campus. So that was tremendous fun, right?
It was. And those moments have stayed with me in my own work to this day, just in terms of how I approach music making and how I share that which has been given to me. And so that was such a gift. Yeah, good times.
Right. Exactly. And what happened later, Scott? How did you move from Michigan to Memphis now?
So I continued with the master's degree, and then I was planning on getting a Fulbright. It was in the works, and it was going to happen to study with Jacques van Ootmassen in the Netherlands. But decided, actually got married, and decided to stay in the United States, and went to Indiana University for my doctorate, which was the right move for me. It's exactly where I needed to be. I ended up being a graduate assistant. I taught church music classes and class piano, and then later sight singing at Eastern Michigan, at Indiana University. At Indiana, it's one of the larger organ programs in the country. Indiana and Eastman were the two biggest, and it was a different environment, not competitive in an unhealthy way, but the level of playing was just phenomenal. and I was constantly challenged. And but so I was very glad to be there when I was. My teacher there was Marilyn Keiser, who has since retired, and she is a grande dame of the American organ world, one of the great virtuosos of the 20th century, and just another great mentor. I've been very fortunate to have two incredible mentors, Pamela Ryder-Feenstra and Ellen Keiser. So went there and eventually moved back up to Michigan for a full-time position in an Episcopal church in Plymouth, Michigan, and stayed there for a couple years. But eventually decided we wanted to move south, and so I had applied for numerous positions, received some offers, but none seemed right until I came to the Episcopal Cathedral in Memphis, and that was in 2009. We moved down and was very happy there for many years, and built up a program that had been hurting for a long time, and so really had a great thing there. And but now I'm serving for the first time in my career in a Catholic parish, and am very fortunate to serve under a priest who has a great love for good music, Benedictine trained, and so he's very supportive of my work in ministry. So that's the Cliff's Notes version of how I came to Memphis.
Elevator pitch, right?
Yes, that's right.
Great.
That's right.
So we're going to go back and forth from your early years and now to compare what you learned, and it's wonderful to remember those things. For example, do you remember the first piece on the organ that you played at EMU?
I remember Pamela Ryder-Feenstra had me studying out of the George Ritchie's pedagogy book. Right. And so I started working there. I remember the first performance I gave. It was two settings of Vom Himmel hoch, one by Zachau and one by Pachelbel. And I remember this was at the Methodist Church in Ypsilanti, Michigan. It was part of the prelude before Lessons and Carols service involving university choirs. And my legs were shaking uncontrollably. And the good thing was I only had to play the cantus firmus in the pedal, but I was so nervous. But the one thing I'm so grateful for with Pamela, there came a time where I said, I just want to study organ and have this as just for myself. I was so frightened to perform, but she pushed me. She said, no, music is meant to be shared, and she pushed me. And from that first performance of Zachau and Pachelbel to today, I mean, I'm eternally grateful to that. So I remember that one thing, and stop me if I'm going on too much, but I started Eastern Michigan University at the time. We had cassette tapes of old organ programs, pipe dreams, and different albums. And I started listening, and we had this repository, this library of American Organist magazines. Right. And I knew nothing about this world, but I just started eating it up. And I remember the first organ CD I bought was actually E. Power Biggs playing Bach on I think it's the Flentrop at Harvard in the Busch-Reisinger Museum. And he played this, just works of Bach on this organ. My first time really hearing a virtuoso playing Bach. And I remember the A minor Prelude and Fugue, 543. And I had no business playing it at that time. But I recall saying to Dr. Ryder-Feenstra that I really like this piece. I want to play it. And she did not. Many teachers would have said, no, you're not ready for that. Right. She encouraged me. And I wasn't at a point where I could really play that, where I would want to perform it now. But she encouraged that. And to the point that I played the cadenza at the end for our first improvisation symposium. And I believe, if my memory serves me right, it was a disaster performance-wise, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter because it was in such a warm environment, and it was about trying things, taking chances, taking leaps, and knowing that from that we grow and we learn and become better musicians. And that proved to be the case.
Yeah, Pamela was an expert in in sharing her knowledge in a very friendly way that didn't intimidate the students at all. She had ideas like dialogues and duets, right?
Yes.
What's the big deal? Thirds and sixths, you can do this, right? Parallel thirds or opposite direction, no big deal. And people tried. Our students, colleagues, right? We did. Some better than others, doesn't matter, right? It's important that you just start somewhere and then you develop as you go.
Absolutely. And now I'm working for a Catholic parish, and being at the Episcopal Cathedral, I had to improvise all the time. And I make no claim, I am no great improviser, and I haven't kept up my chops, but I can do it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not afraid to do it, even at whatever level I'm at. There's really no fear. And that is, I attribute that entirely to the environment that Pamela fostered at Eastern Michigan University. Without that, we know a lot of organists, and we work so much on repertoire for so many, especially here in America. This is changing, of course. It's been changing, but to ask someone to improvise publicly, I mean, you would think you were asking them a life or death question. So.
Right. So, like people, according to recent studies, people's most number 2 fear is death, right? And number 1 is public speaking.
Really?
Number 2 is deaf. Only number 2. So if you are an average person, you're better off in lying in the casket than doing the eulogy.
That's funny.
It is. If you have the terrible experience at going and doing something in public, improvisation is one of them, right? And not only speaking, but playing, giving your best. That might be very terrifying, right? But somehow with taking those first steps, not leaps, but steps, basically. You discover some things, right? You make those mistakes which don't kill you, right?
Right, exactly.
And you learn from them.
I'm naturally an extrovert, and I don't mind being up in front of groups, and I love playing concerts to audiences, but to improvise in front of a group, that was just that was so difficult for me to open myself up. I remember going to Smarano. I think, did you ever go to Smarano, the organist?
No, but of course that's a great place. Yeah.
And again, I was still relatively early in my organ studies. And of course, here are students from all over the world, and some from the States, from Eastman and Yale. And here I am, in my third year of playing organ. But again, even there, Pamela, she showed me with the repertoire and gave me the list of repertoire. And I volunteered to play in front of these groups of people. I was so nervous. But again, it was all about just taking that step, taking those steps, making yourself a little uncomfortable, yes, but it's through that I grew. That's part of my own journey. And at the moment, it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. But those have been such formative experiences for me.
Exactly. We have to remind our listeners that Smarano Organ Academy is where? In Italy, right? In the mountains of
Northern Italy.
Yeah, Northern Italy. Beautiful landscape, right? And fantastic food. And
it's this tiny village. It's a small town in the foothills of the Alps, filled with great organs, and the whole region, of course, they have a lot of significant historical instruments. But they would bring in clavichords and harpsichords, and it was just amazing. We'd have some of the best organ pedagogues in the world. Balti, Davidson, Joel Spearstra was there, I recall, and a number of others, and it was just such a gift.
Exactly. So in Indiana University, it's a big program, right? Very competitive.
Yes.
You constantly see competition winners, right?
Yes.
At the first pages of the TAO magazine, right?
Right.
From Indiana. Well, sometimes Eastman as well, and those two programs lead the organist profession into the future in this country, right? Basically.
Sure.
of course, there are a number of other important schools like Yale and Juilliard and others. But with the number of students, can you remember how many students there were at the time that you studied at the Indiana?
Organ majors, there were at least 30, and most of them were graduate, master's and doctoral students. Now the dynamic at Indiana has changed. The faculty have changed, and it's the program is just. They have a bunch of new instruments, and it's really exploding now. It's even bigger. But we had at least 30 organ majors. It was between 30 and 40. Mm-hmm. But there were different studios, and we didn't have that type of animosity among the studios, not at all. But within the studios, we were a pretty tight-knit group, and we all, the hallway in the music building, one of the many music buildings there, where all the practice organs were, we would all just sit on the floor of the hallway and eat lunch together and wait for a practice organ, but it was really a great environment for me to grow at that point.
And of course, you were a mature musician at the time, right? You
I don't know that I can make that claim today, but I was at a different place, of course, than when I had started my bachelor's program at Eastern. So I had some experience.
Right, and the DMA program, or not DMA, DM. Right,
Doctor of Music. You're right.
So it's very different from Master of Music, or Master of Arts, right? That Eastern Michigan University offered. Can you give us a little bit of that experience? Was it a lot of research, or performance, or combined? How was it divided between?
Yeah. I think heavy on performance, though. Indiana its research component is quite rigorous. At least I've compared with other programs in the country, and maybe not the most. I don't know, but there was a lot of academic work that was required. You have your typical graduate classes, but just in terms of the research, I found myself in the library quite a bit. But of course, mine was a performance-based degree, and so I was required to give multiple recitals. And we were lucky; we had a really tight-knit organ department, and we as a department, the students would get together and we would put on organ and choral concerts and do different things. And so it was we created additional performance opportunities. We did an annual Halloween Pike Spooktacular concert, which I continue to this day because it's just great fun. But in terms of the research, I received 2 minors, one in music theory and one in church music, and the music theory was very difficult for me. I'd had some decent instruction at Eastern, but at Indiana it was on a different plane altogether. So Schenkerian analysis and analysis of 20th century music, Bartok and whatnot. It was completely out of my comfort zone, and that was a great challenge. I made it through and did well, but not without a bit of stress. The church music just helped to deepen my work there and my knowledge, really to give me a rather broad view of that type of work, that vocation here, especially in the United States. Marilyn Keiser, she knows the sacred choral repertoire inside and out. We had a class, it's called a church music practicum. We dealt with interviews, clergy relationships, clergy relations, all different choir recruiting, the varied aspects of a church musician's work here in the United States. And so that was also one of the greatest experiences was how to console conduct and how to accompany choral anthems. And one of Marilyn Keiser's one of her sayings was, when it came to a choral accompaniment and console conducting, never trust the printed page. It wasn't carte blanche to do whatever you wanted, but you always have to make there are exceptions, or you have to make different changes in the music in order to make it happen.
Exactly.
Especially when reducing an orchestral score for the organ. And that was so helpful for me, and I've used that quite a bit. I taught undergraduate church music classes, and I remember looking at the curriculum, and I really had to develop part of that curriculum. I remember speaking with Marilyn Keiser before the first semester, and I said, Dr. Keiser, I don't even know how to do some of this. And she said, well, you'll learn it by teaching it. Exactly. Through teaching it, you'll learn it. And then that was indeed the case. In terms of performance, of course, gave multiple recitals. I eventually chose my final document topic through work in the graduate research course, bibliographic study, and I wrote it on the Central German organist composer Johann Heinrich Gutstedt And my work, I've not yet published it, and I need to, because I found at least one item of historical import. But it turns out it is now what appears to be the most comprehensive study of Buttstedt in the English language.
Right.
And so that's something I need to pursue, but of course having a child and working changes a lot of that. But Buttstedt was the focus of my research.
Yes, you mentioned those church music courses, right? How you conduct at the council, and it's so different in every situation. Sometimes you're facing the congregation, sometimes you face the organ, sometimes to the side, to the other side, and it all changes. You have to do with one hand or another. So then you constantly have to rearrange stuff, right? With basically taking as much of the music of notes into the one hand, preferably the right hand, right? And playing with your feet, and then conducting with another, right? And then turning pages, probably. It's so complicated, it seems, right?
Yes, it's an acquired skill. It just doesn't come. I mean, you can know the music inside and out, but one has to practice console conducting just as one practices repertoire or improvisation. So, it's very difficult, but Marilyn Keiser really impressed upon us how important that is. And that was part of our work, our homework for the class, is to practice console conducting. And that class was kind of a lab of sorts. So we would each have to console conduct, but then we would alternate. Some of us would accompany and some of us would conduct. We would do it apart from the organ. And she would assign different pieces from the repertoire, especially the Anglican repertoire. And that was such a gift. Because we would not only would we build upon those skills, but we would learn the repertoire while doing it. So
now, do you have to console conduct too?
I do. I do.
Or do you have an assistant organist, for example?
No. When I was at the cathedral, I had an assistant, but and the arrangement was such that it would be very difficult to console conduct. But where I'm at now, I actually have to do it with my right hand. Such as the arrangement is, it's with my right hand. So that's been an added difficulty. But it's just what we do.
Are you left-handed, Scott?
No.
So it's really tricky to play with the left hand, right? The top parts. I can feel that. So, but you learn by doing and making mistakes, right? And falling over and then getting up and still. Your choir, of course, are very supportive of your efforts, I guess. And
absolutely. And I tell them if I'm not going to give it with my hand, look at my chin, look at my head, and I joke around about it. I might do something with my shoulder or my knee. And then, just look up and watch. One way or the other, I will give you the cue. But I really do practice and work to make sure I'm consistent. A choir needs that in their director. I believe that consistency. So there's no guesswork about how this is going to happen.
And Buttstedt, of course, the very obscure Middle German composer from the Baroque period.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit of his background?
For Buttstedt's, he's most known for a theoretical debate he entered into with Johann Mattheson, and he was eviscerated by Johann Mattheson, who was by far his intellectual superior. Just to simplify it, Buttstedt was advocating looking back to the church modes and railing against modern tonality that was being espoused by Mattheson. And they entered into a very public, very nasty debate, rebutting one another in the various publications. And Mattheson's Neu eröffnete Orchestra was a rebuttal to Buttstedt. I mean, it really was. And Buttstedt, after that debate, he really receded, even though he lived for another 20 years. He really, his prominence receded. But he was known as a student of Pachelbel, and he stayed in Erfurt. He was, for most of his life, the music director at the Predigerkirche in Erfurt. And he has quite an output. I focused on his one collection called the Musikalische Vorratskammer, and Kunstwerk und Vorratskammer. I can't believe I can't just name that. But a collection of pieces, all free works. And he has this extended preface where he outlines his argument for returning to the church modes. There's this amazing frontispiece with all of this rhetorical symbolism in a lot of the images. It's just beautiful publication. And I came to this project because at Indiana, in our vault, we had a copy that Willy Appel had made of the original publication from 1713. It was in the vault. Of course, Willy Appel wrote the keyboard music before 1700, and so he went around Europe collecting these manuscripts and these sources. So we had that at Indiana, and we also had a biography of Buchstadt in German from the 1930s. From the 1930s, and so those two sources led me on this path. And so I found various materials. I wrote a fairly comprehensive biographical. I had a biographical outline of his, and also looked at the one modern edition available through Schott, Klaus Beckmann, the well-known editor, and went through that. I compared the modern edition with the original publication. Of course, found many discrepancies and whatnot, but yeah, as one will with any edition. But I have to say here, I found one item of historical import, if I may announce that on this podcast.
Excellent.
I had always learned. I was told from my undergraduate years, the notational device known as the double dot was sort of invented by Leopold Mozart in his treatise on violin playing. Of course, there was a performance practice in the French overture style of double dotting rhythms, but they didn't have the musical notation until Leopold Mozart. And I later looked in the Oxford Dictionary of Music. It states this. Well, in this 1713 publication by Johann Heinrich Buchstadt, well before Leopold Mozart, in this Preludium, which is it's like an early fantasia, there are multiple instances of the double dot from 1713. Now, it wasn't in the French overture style; it was in the context of trills. But I cannot say that Leopold. I can say with certainty that Leopold Mozart was not the first to use the double dot. I think Mozart came to it honestly. He likely knew nothing of Buchstadt and this work, but for that reason, if that reason alone, I need to publish some of these results just to show that it did exist. It did exist, and I looked for other instances where it was used in the context with a trill, but I could find none. And if any of our listeners have any examples, I would love to hear about that. But I couldn't find any in my research, and so that was very, very exciting. And in my public defense, I talked about that and piqued some people's interest. But
I hope you will publish that because it's important, right?
It is in some small way. It's a contribution.
You correct some common knowledge, right? Everybody thinks that Leopold Mozart did that, but no, right? It was earlier.
Right.
Right. Fantastic. So now, of course, you are a music director, right? Very important title in organist profession, right? Many church musicians strive to achieve that title, going from assistant organist, right, to other means, and then when you become like music director, you lead the musical life in the parish, right? So tell us a little bit, how do you lead the musical life in your parish?
In my current parish?
Yeah.
Well, I have it's not a large Catholic church. We'd call it a medium family parish here in the United States. But it's a vibrant community. Their music program had been through some trauma prior to my coming. There had been some turnover with music directors, and there had been no consistent leadership, unfortunately, there. And so I came in just last November, and I direct a parish choir. I have about, if everyone were to come on any given week, I'd have about 30 people in my parish choir, which is really great. I've got a children's choir of about 10 kids, teaching them solfege is something they've never had, solfege. And one thing I'm actually, with all of my choirs, I'm planning to introduce this season the pneumatic notation. So we can read and sight read chant. Because that's something that's not done in most American Catholic parishes, quite admittedly.
Very great. You're doing such a tremendous, I think, work here, because even though it's important for your music program, right, to sight read and do solfege, but later on, when they move on with their lives, they will learn this skill, right, and this skill will remain with them. So what you're doing is tremendously valuable.
So that will be new. I also have a folk band. A lot of Catholic parishes in the United States do sort of contemporary folk music, and we have that as well. And to be quite honest, that music, and I am not, in my work as a church musician, I'm not either or. You can only do one style of music. I truly believe that there can be good repertoire found in all various traditions. And so I incorporate that repertoire as well. That's part of their history. It was only with the current pastor, head priest at this parish, that they instituted more traditional, they bought a more traditional hymnal and started learning some of this wonderful Catholic repertoire that has been around for centuries, of course. So I do lead that group every other week. I have a handbell choir. Americans love their handbells, and so I have that, and that's a lot of fun. I also have a funeral choir. I have a separate choir for all of our funeral masses. I'm looking maybe this year, by the next at the latest, to begin a scola. I would like to have a scola, a men's scola, to sing primarily chant and some polyphony. But that's a goal of mine.
When you're working full time in such a field, right, the music director, sometimes people feel that they no longer have time to practice, right, because they have to do this administrative work with chasing up copyrights and planning and dealing with meetings, those things, right, which are important. But you, as an organist, sometimes you feel, wait a minute, my skills are degrading sometimes, right? Do you feel that you can basically do 50-50 of preparation and performance, or how do you divide your time in your work?
It is very, very easy to get stuck behind the computer. It is very, very easy to do that. And I mean, to be honest, I can probably just sit down and play the Mass without practicing. I'm a good reader. I'm a good sight reader, and a lot of the masterworks I played at the university I can bring up in less than a week's time. So I have that gift, but I don't rely on that. And I make time for practice, and I give multiple recitals a year. I think that's important. And I play repertoire that I've played before, but I also play new repertoire. I make sure I give at least 1 to 2 concerts a year. This year I plan to give 3 or 4. I'm always learning new repertoire. For instance, I've started one of my favorite pieces of music in the organ literature that I've never played and I always wanted to, and I can't remember if you did or not, the Prelude et Fugue sur la Nonne d'Alain by Maurice Durflay. I've always wanted to play this piece, and so I'm learning it now, and I devote time. The Mass is such that I really won't have a chance to play that during Mass, after, certainly, but this will be a concert piece, and so I'm learning that daily. I spend time with that. So I do make time to practice. I think that's very important. It's so easy to lose sight of that, of course. There is a lot of planning, copyrights and whatnot, arranging music, communicating with people about upcoming events. Yes, that is very important. I have a child. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and so that takes a lot of time too. That's my greatest priority in life. But when I'm at work, I have to spend time almost daily, not every day, but almost daily. I spend time in the church practicing.
Fantastic that you have this will, right? Very strict approach to practicing, right?
Yes.
You could rely on your talent, right, or your previous experiences. You could sight read everything almost perfectly, right? But in the end, in the long run, it does hurt. I think musicians, if they do that, if they rely on talent.
and I remember, I'm pretty sure this came from Pamela, you can always discover something new in Bach's organ works, be that an Orgelbüchlein chorale or a large prelude and fugue. You can always discover something new. And I try to, I keep that with me, and I take that to heart, that even in the works that I've played previously, I could play it quickly, prepare it quickly, and sometimes I do that. But I really look to see, okay, how do I hear this now? What do I want to bring up? What do I want to highlight now? What does this mean? What am I trying to express? What's different now? But just even new pieces, I have to try to find something new. If I don't, I remain static. And then I can only speak for myself, but I don't wish to remain static artistically. As long as I can play, and I want to make clear, I believe it is a gift to be able to do this for one's vocation, career. I know how fortunate I am in this world. I remember Marilyn Keiser saying in one of my lessons, we just stopped playing. And she looked at me and said, Scott, aren't we blessed to be able to do that which we love? So many people in this world can't do anything like that. And I don't think I quite understood it at that time. I do now. I like to think I do now. But so I'm so grateful. I mean, what a gift it is to be able to go into work and spend time challenging myself playing Maurice Duruflé. That's a pretty good life.
And get paid for that, right?
And get paid for it. I mean, really. And have benefits.
Get paid for what you would be doing for free anyway, right?
Well, right. Exactly.
Amazing.
I hope I never take that for granted.
So. Well, of course, you mentioned this issue of taking your work and looking at it very deeply and loving your work, right? When you love your work,
yes.
It's no longer work, right? It's a passion. It's a calling, don't you think?
It is, and I call it a vocation. I didn't always call it a calling, but a calling, a vocation. I do call it that now. There was a point where I didn't, but I think maybe I've grown up enough at this point, or just to really see it for what it is, and to be grateful. And I left St. Mary's Cathedral and worked a real job for a year. I was a manager in a public library here in Memphis, and I'm glad I had that experience. That's not a good fit for Scott, but I'm glad I had that experience because it gave me a renewed appreciation for what we as musicians do.
Yeah.
And what, not only for myself, but what we communicate to other people, the lives that we can impact through our music. I work with a choir, and I mean, we're not doing Thomas Tallis. This choir is not at that point yet. But what we do, what I do every week, I hope I do, is build lives, build faith lives, build however one interprets it, but just to bring people joy through music, teach them something so that they feel a little better. They feel like they've been enlightened in some way, but also help to deepen their faith through music. It's very important to me.
It's a gift, right? It's a privilege. Practice is privilege. Do you remember Pamela Reuter-Finstra always stressed that? Practice is privilege, and whenever we take this for granted, we sort of get lazy and say, it's cold, right? I won't practice today, maybe tomorrow or in a week. Who cares, right? But people do care. Actually, Scott, do your choir members care that you constantly trying to improve and play recitals for them once or twice a year?
They had never had church. They had never had recitals at this parish, and I've given since November. I've already given 2, and I mean we had 300 people at each of them, and they were just so. I mean, it's not about the numbers for me, but there was such a groundswell of support and excitement for that sort of thing. Like, look at what we even in this parish, some would say. But I don't look at it like that. But we can do fun, great musical things, however you want to describe it, anywhere. In any context, you can reach people in any context. You have to learn to speak the language and learn how to communicate. But for me, it is about that communication, about that deepening of one's life.
Scott, do you have to motivate people to get better all the time in your choir, or do they have this internal motivation and they come prepared for your rehearsals?
I think I don't have to explicitly do that, but I aim to in how I approach it to motivate. I'm a high energy person. Sometimes I talk too much, but I'm a high energy person, and I myself am quite motivated, and I get excited, maybe even a little too easily at times. I'm very comfortable in front of groups of people, and I hope, and people have told me this, but I hope people can feed off that excitement, and they usually do. And when it comes to recruiting for choirs, I've never been one really. I'm not afraid to ask people, but I've never been one to keep bothering people. Join the choir, join the choir, join the choir. What I do is I aim to build the choir, improve the choir, the musical quality, but also show that it's a lot of fun. And when they see that it's a lot of fun, or just there's good camaraderie before or after Mass, there's good camaraderie, there are smiles, and that they're sounding better, they're improving, doing just really, really deepening the worship life of the parish. People want to join something like that. They want to be a part of something like that. And so I do, as best as I am able to, I try to foster that environment as best as I am, just as Pamela did for us. I mean, Pamela and for me, Marilyn Keiser, I could not have had better mentors in my life. And I try to maintain that. You remember how Pamela would teach with such excitement with our improvisations. There was such excitement there, and it was infectious. And even if we're scared to do it, we want to be a part of that.
Exactly. So people look and see your enthusiasm, right, through your eyes, through your gestures, and they believe that you can basically transmit something deeper, something bigger than themselves to them, and let them grow, and which makes a lot of difference for modern people, because all they do sometimes they sit in their smartphones, right, and all the time. But now you help them come together physically and do something together, create music together in a physical way, not through texting or doing something on the phone, but it's such a deep and physical experience singing together, right? And I think technology cannot really change that, right? Or make it somehow different, right? We still need this physical aspect of getting together and singing together.
There's no substitute for it. And I always remind, or we talk about, incorporate the fact that we're doing this for praise and prayer, and to lead a congregation in song. And I would say all of my members really believe in what they do from a sacred point of view, not only from the communal aspect, the educational aspect, but also in leading worship, that is as high a calling as there is, that we are entrusted to lead in song, or in some way to lead in song this gathered body, and so that's an important. I mean, that's such a great unifier, because we're all there. We all have our own motivations and whatnot, but ultimately our goal is to lead in prayer and praise. So.
It's a common purpose, right? And it unifies people and makes the whole community come together, not just in choir, but you feel this energy in the entire church, right?
Yes, absolutely, and there's nothing better than really just hearing the human voice. So one thing I do when I'm accompanying hymnody, I often, and this is difficult at first perhaps, but you have to train the choir well, I drop out. We'll do a stanza a cappella, because to me there is nothing more beautiful than the human voice in concert singing hymns. To me, that's such a pure expression of faith. And so I try. I mean, sometimes I'll do big improvisations on a hymn stanza, of course, like we do. But to me, there's nothing more beautiful than the organ just dropping out and leading the congregation in a cappella singing. I love that.
it's a scary experience for choir members, though, right?
At first, it is.
You have to get acquainted with the feeling at first, right? But gradually they know their parts and know the harmony, and somehow they trust that they can, right? So
right.
Help.
And of course, you train a choir for that sort of thing. You do, but I will do it on the fly, as we say. If I am getting a sense of where the congregation is at while we are singing. I think that's what we always, when we accompany Mass, service, a hymn, whatever, we need to be sensitive to, we need to be constantly aware of what's happening. And if I sense in a hymn, like, okay, I just feel moved by, however you want to call it, moved by the Spirit, or just confident in the congregation's ability, whatever, I will drop out the organ, and I'll conduct, of course, but that to me, when it just happens instantaneously like that, it's really phenomenal.
Would you encourage our listeners, Scott, who lead choirs in churches, right, to experiment with this technique, dropping out and leading the a cappella stance once in a while?
Yeah, absolutely. And then they really listen to themselves, the choir members. They really begin to listen to themselves, and that helps to build up their confidence, especially, I've never had that fall flat, right? It's never just completely fallen apart. Or if I hear, well, I think at some points I've come back in quietly, maybe toward the end of a stanza, if I feel that things aren't quite gelling, and that's fine, but absolutely experiment with it. And at first, prep your choir. Practice it. And then I always say,
prepare for the unexpected element, right?
Right, exactly. And I play 3 Masses a weekend, which isn't that much, but I will sometimes in the first 2 Masses get a sense of how this works in the singing life, faith life of this congregation. And so my last Mass is the primary Mass with the choir, and so we get to experience that. And I have some idea as I go into it. Once you've been doing something long enough, you get an idea of how things work. But like I said, I'm always not only pushing myself to learn Duraflay or to practice counterpoint improvisation, I seek to do the same with my ensembles. And when you're working with volunteers, sometimes that can be difficult for them. It moves them outside of their comfort zone. But I've learned that when I go into a new position, I can't just come in like a wrecking ball and make changes, say, no, we're not doing this, we're not doing that, I don't like this, I don't like that. Early on in my career, I wasn't cruel about it or mean, but I came in and say, okay, this is what we're doing now. You really need to build that trust with members of your music ministry. And I work very hard to do that. They get to know me, not only musically, but personally. I'd like to impress upon our listeners, we can't all do this, but I think it's very important for a musician, in as much as possible, to attend parish functions. To go, my daughter and I went to the parish picnic, and I sat in a dunking booth, and people threw balls at this target and would dunk me in a bunch of water. Now, we all can't do that, and not everyone's comfortable with that sort of thing, but I think it's important in some way to be involved with the parish life. Because, you're not pulling the wool over people, you're not faking anything, not at all. But becoming a part of that parish, they know you, they trust you, they begin to love you in a certain way, and then, you can really lead musically, and they'll do anything because they know that you're working to improve. You're working for the greater glory, not for myself, for my own glory. Exactly. I don't know if that makes sense, and that won't work for everybody, but that's just in my experience. What I really seek to do is to become part of the parish life.
Yeah, it happens that people are sometimes, strictly professional, right? And they stick in the box of their profession, right? Leading the choir, musical life, and that's it, right?
And there's a place for that. I'm not saying that that's wrong.
But if you get involved, for example, everybody wants to be interesting, right? For others, right? That they get good communication, right? But if you want to do that, you have to stay interested too. What they are doing too in their lives, and how you can help them. Basically, they help you, and you help out too. And
right.
I feel that you have this in your daily work, Scott. That you you sort of a part of a bigger community, not only an organist and a choir master and then a music director, but you care, right? You care about what happens behind the rehearsals, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's music. It's not an end in and of itself. Sometimes it is. You have this musical performance, but even in a concert, it's about communicating and it's about developing lives. That's my vocation. That's how I see it. It's about developing lives, faith lives, personal lives, intellectual lives, communal lives. It's really about building people, of course, in the context of church and through faith. It's not that with everything, of course, but I'll be honest, not everyone is always going to agree with your musical choices. You inevitably get complaints the organ's too loud here or there. I think every parish musician has heard that at one point. So you're never going to have everyone agree with everything you do, and that's okay, because it ends up creating opportunities for dialogue, for discussing and for understanding, for teaching people. Okay, I think that's the most common complaint, and I don't really get it much, but the organ was too loud. Well, let me tell you about why that one stanza was on a louder registration versus it wasn't. If you notice, it wasn't all loud. There was a different sound or a different technique, and let me show you why that is. Let's look at the text here and see why that would have been a bigger sound. There's a very specific reason for that, and when you do that, that helps create dialogue, and not to get everyone to like me or like everything I do, but just to communicate that there's more to it.
Right. And you're not being defensive, right?
No. I always thank people. I always thank people, and I mean it. I thank you for telling me, because what that means is they're engaged. They care.
They care, right?
They have a vested interest in this. They may not agree with this or that, but they care. And I pray I never get defensive or condescending. That would be so counterproductive and counter to how I approach things. So,
and this caring, this common purpose, of course, unifies people, but it only is possible when the entire congregation works together. For example, if you have a priest or a pastor, right, your boss basically telling one thing but doing completely another, right? Basically, his words doesn't agree, right, with his deed.
Right.
Then you feel kind of it's shady, right? And you don't want to be a part of that, right? You kind of do your job and get out, get in and get out.
Sure.
But if you believe in what they're doing and that you are helping everybody's cause, right? It's a blessing. What sometimes the situation is. It not always happens, right? Good clergy relations.
And I know how blessed I am. Really, almost every position I've ever held, I've had very supportive clergy, and I know that is not the case in every situation. You hear horror stories all the time, and that's not been my reality. And I know how fortunate I am. So, I mean, if I had a different clergy situation, maybe I wouldn't be as involved in the parish. I don't know. I can't say, but I do know that almost every parish I've ever served, I've had loving, supportive clergy who care about the music, but they also trust. Who care about the music, but they also trust in the work in ministry. And so that is a gift, and that may be even rare. I don't know, but that has been my experience, and I have been extremely blessed with every position. I know how lucky I am.
Right. So Scott, of course, you love music ministry. You think that it's your vocation, right? You feel that. And can you imagine yourself being not an organist or church musician in another life? For example, if you had a chance for another go, right, here on earth, would you choose the same path for you?
That I can say yes, undoubtedly. A resounding yes. And by taking that year off, working a real job, I shouldn't say that, but working a different type of career. And I thought for a while, I could do something else, make more money, just be able to take big vacations, yada, yada, yada. And no, when you're called to do something, I mean, if I had to do everything I could to get back into the field. And again, I'll harken back to what I said when I started taking organ. It was a love affair. It's like I knew immediately. I've had a few of those moments in my life where it was just like a light switch going on, and where I forget something, and then it just something happens. I call it the Spirit, call it good fortune. It doesn't. I don't care what anyone calls it. But it was that way when I started playing the organ, and I just knew that was where I needed to be. And I had a calling last year before I came back into the field. Something happened, and I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's where I needed to be. And so, I mean, who knows? In any given situation, I'm the son of a Lutheran minister, a very great pastor, and a loving father, and who's very supportive of me, always has been. And I was raised in a church environment, a good Lutheran environment. Who knows, if I had been raised in another environment, I'd have no interest. But given the choice, I would want to be doing nothing else than what I'm doing now.
Fantastic. And do you have anything to share with our listeners? For example, if you think about going back in time, and is there anything you wish you knew when you first started playing the organ and doing church music that might have helped you that you know now, for example? Do you have any advice for people like that?
I wish I would have listened more. I think part of that comes with maturing. When you're a student at college, you're in your early 20s, and you have a different worldview perspective. But there are many lessons, not just musical lessons, but life lessons that were given to me from Pamela and Marilyn Keiser. And I wish I had listened more. And there were times I know in my own practice, thinking, I know, I don't agree with that, or I know the right way to do it, or, I know the better way to do it, or the historically informed, or not, whatever. Who cares about this? This is how I'm going to do it. I had a bit of that at times. You're confident young musician. You think you're the master of the world. That's a little much, but I wish I had really listened more at that time. At the time, it's funny though. Now when I play something, I'm working on the G minor 542, the G minor prelude fugue. Working on the fugue right now. I haven't played that since my master's degree. I just haven't played it, and I'm going back and I'm reading the notes from Pamela, and it's so interesting. When I see her handwriting on the score, I'm using the same score. Images start coming back. Lessons start coming back. I begin to associate one with the other, and that's a gift that I can recall a lot of that. But I wish I would have had the wherewithal to really open my ears to everything that was being given to me. So, if that makes any sense.
Thank you so much, Scott, for being so open, so generous, and sharing your insights. I think people around the world will appreciate and get inspired to listen more, right? To try out new things like do a cappella stanzas, right? That you talked about.
Yeah, right.
And of course, they want to know more about you and your work. So, can you give us a link where they can find you and your work online?
Let's see. Yes. The link for my parish, I don't have a music page up, but I plan to eventually with some recordings from my concerts. But it's nativitybartlett.org. So NATIVITYBARTLETT.org. Nativitybartlett.org. You could also Google Church of the Nativity. I have a YouTube channel. I haven't put anything on there. There are only a few videos, but if you search, you could just search my name, Scott Elsholz, or 76 Orgelmeister, I think was my handle. I think they've changed that now into my name, but just search for Scott Elsholz and you'll find some videos. I'm really happy with some of those actually from on YouTube. And you can also search for me on Facebook. Facebook I don't use that much, only professionally and to show family pictures of my daughter. That's my primary use of Facebook. But you can find me there, send me a message.
Are you on LinkedIn too?
I'm not. No, I'm not on LinkedIn. And I don't have my own website. I was going that route, but I don't know. I guess once becoming a parent, I just focus more on that. But But yeah, listen to some YouTube recordings. Go to the church website. There's not much there, but send me a message. I can also give my email, which is scottelsholz@gmail.com. That's SCOTTELSHOLZ@gmail.com. It's interesting. I've received emails. Someone did find my work with Buchstedt once, a well-known researcher in the field, actually, and she contacted me once for a bit of information. She found my email. So if anyone wants to know about Johann Heinrich Buchstedt, look me up, and I'd be happy to share some of that information. The dissertation is available online. If you just Google Buchstedt and Scott Elsholz, you'll find it. A link to the whole work. So
fantastic. So I'll get the description and the link and everything put together, and give people a chance to visit your work and connect with you too.
Great.
So thank you so much, Scott. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. And of course, this hour passed so quickly, right? And,
I can't believe we've already been at this an hour. I could go again, go, but this has been a gift, and it's such a delight to dialogue, to duet and dialogue with you yet again, Vidas.
Exactly. So Scott, I wish you fantastic creative year and many creative accidents, right? That will lead into new vistas, right? Creative vistas, and get outside of your comfort zone more often, right?
Yes.
And stay
healthy. Amen to that.
Stay healthy too, and.
You as well.
Thank you so much. Osha sends her greetings too.
Give her my love. Thank you.
If you liked this conversation, I encourage you to visit my blog Secrets of Organ Playing at organduo.lt, where you will find lots of insights, practical advice, and training for every area of organ playing. You can subscribe to this blog for free to get your daily dose of inspiration and to be the first to know when any of my future podcasts roll out. I hope to help you reach your dreams in organ playing. I'm Vidas Pilkevičius. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you online really soon.